Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set to attend the G7 summit in France after being invited by French President Emmanuel Macron. Defence and security cooperation, trade, technology are all set to top the agenda for Prime Minister Narendra Modi's nearly week-long visit to France and Slovakia, who will also attend the G7 summit and hold bilateral consultations. Now, Prime Minister Modi, who began the visit on June 13th, has said that France occupies a special place in India's strategic vision. He added that his discussions with President Emmanuel Macron will also focus on enhancing cooperation in key sectors, especially technology, while his participation in outreach sessions of the G7 summit will be an opportunity to give voice to the aspirations of the global south. My colleague Megha Sharma is on the ground in Nice, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi held bilateral talks with the French President. Megha, what are the key takeaways from the Modi-Macron meeting that actually took place?
Well, it is Prime Minister Narendra Modi's 7th visit to France ever since he became Prime Minister in 2014. The Prime Minister Modi and President Macron held their bilateral meeting. This took place in Nice. And the key takeaways coming in from this meeting are, of course, number one, innovation. In fact, when in February 2026, which was earlier this year, President Macron had arrived in India, both leaders had signed an agreement of the India-France Innovation Year. Under this aegis, the India-France Innovation Year, there have been a number of commitments that have been made by the two leaders with regards to technology, with regards to artificial intelligence, cyber security, deep tech. These are all the subjects that were discussed between the two leaders. Of course, when we talk about France and India and its bilateral relationship, we cannot forget about the defense cooperation. There has been a strong emphasis that has been made by the two leaders. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in talks with President Macron, specifically spoke about how there needs to be co-development, co-production and transfer of technology that needs to take place for the Rafale deal that has been signed at $89 billion. There are 114 of these Rafale fighter jets that are going to be procured by India by the end of 2030. It is expected that the 90 of the Rafales are going to be actually built in India. It is a Make in India initiative. The remaining of the 14 of those fighter jets, Rafale fighter jets, are going to be brought in from France, which are going to be ready, which are going to be in the fly status. So with regards to that, there are other of these defense deals that are also on the anvil in the coming years. Although there is no announcement that had been made by the two leaders during their bilateral meeting with regards to an actual memorandum being signed for the 114 of those Rafales that India seeks to procure from France. Besides that, let's also take a look at the very important aspect of education, of the very important aspect of Bharat Innovates, the inaugural summit that was inaugurated in Nice in the presence of Prime Minister Modi and President Macron. There were as many as 120 Indian startups and deep tech and AI companies that participated. 300 of these innovators and companies and big tech industrialists also participated in this event from all across Europe. The emphasis was on showcasing India's AI talent, India's technology talent and innovation talent to the rest of the world in a bid for future collaborations. With regards to education as well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has invited French educational institutions to come to India and set up their headquarters in India. Mobility and people-to-people connect. France at this point of time is wooing Indian students to come and travel and study in France. There are at least 20,000 of these students who have been provided visas. These visas have been facilitated by the French embassies and consulates across the country. The target is to increase this number to more than 30,000 in the next few years, in 2030. Besides that, France is also seeking to attract more and more Indian skilled workers when it comes to technology, when it comes to artificial intelligence, and the other of these important industries that France is spearheading in entire Europe. So these were the big takeaways that have come from India, France, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Macron's.
Absolutely, Megha, a lot on the plate over there. But what is on the agenda of Prime Minister Narendra Modi as he tours France and Slovakia?
The Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, finished the first leg of his Europe tour in Nice in France yesterday. He held that very important integral bilateral meeting with President Macron. He also inaugurated the maiden Bharat Innovates Summit in Nice. He is in Slovakia. He is holding that very important bilateral meeting with the Slovak Republic Prime Minister, Robert Fico. That is extremely important vis-a-vis India's bilateral relationship, India's trade relationship, India's defense relationship with Slovakia. Now, after the free trade agreement that has been signed between the two regions, India and European Union, it further strengthens ties between Slovakia and India. Remember, Slovakia has continued to be traditionally a provider, an exporter of defense equipment, military equipment to India. Defense technologies is also one of the key aspects that are the feature of India-Slovakia relationship. But this relationship between India and Slovakia is not going to stay within the realm of client and supplier mode. The push at this point of time is, and it has already happened, that there are a number of Indian defense manufacturers in the private sector that are also providing defense technologies and defense equipment to Slovakia. The other important aspect when it comes to trade between Slovakia and India is the export that Slovakia does of automobiles across the globe, and for which it imports automobile components from India. So that also gets an impetus with the European Union and India FTA, which is going to be a direct benefit to Slovakia and India by way of reduced tariffs. So those are going to be the talks that are going to be the focus between Prime Minister Modi and President Robert Fico when both the leaders meet in Slovakia. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to be in Slovakia on the 16th and 17th of June. 17th of June is when he is going to be flying out of Slovakia from Bratislava, and he's going to be arriving here at Evian for the G7 summit.
Right, Megha, and also what is going to be on the agenda of the talks between US President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the sidelines of the G7 summit?
Well, it is after 16 months that both the leaders, Prime Minister Modi and President Trump, are going to be meeting on the sidelines of the G7 summit. The last time the Prime Minister met the US President was in February 2025 when he visited Washington, D.C. for a state visit. This meeting is important on a number of factors. Of course, the top of the priorities for India and for United States of America is the free trade agreement, the bilateral trade agreement that has been stuck for months together. Remember, both leaders announced that there is going to be a bilateral trade agreement between both the countries, and it is going to conclude. This happened when the Prime Minister visited the US President in February 2025. It has still not been materialized, although there are hectic negotiations that have now been taking place, both from India and United States sides. The trade representative, the assistant US trade representative was in India just a few weeks ago. There is, of course, the Ministry of Commerce, the trade representative of the Ministry of Commerce in India has also traveled to United States of America in the past several months, several times, and it looks like the deal could conclude. There has been, of course, a hiccup that may have arisen between India and United States of America in trying to iron out the differences that both countries face in signing and concluding that trade deal is about the 3 Indian seafarers that have been killed in the Gulf of Oman. Their commercial vessel was targeted by the US Navy. While India raised a strong protest, the External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar himself called Marco Rubio, the US State Secretary, and lodged a protest and condemned this attack and in fact informed the United States of America of taking this unilateral aggressive action that led to the death of these 3 sailors. In the meantime, the US Secretary of State has also released a statement speaking about the communication he had with S. Jaishankar, saying that because the seafarers, because the commercial vessel was illicitly carrying Iranian oil and was traversing through the Strait of Hormuz, it was violating the US blockade that had been announced weeks ago. Therefore, it was pertinent for the US Navy to attack the commercial vessel. He did not show regret on the death of the 3 sailors, and that has sort of soured the relations between 2 countries. So whether that is also going to be one of the key agendas that the Prime Minister is going to raise with US President Donald Trump is something that will be a wait and watch game. It remains to be seen. Of course, that bilateral also is going to touch upon the subjects of mobility, of immigration, of artificial intelligence, where India and United States are collaborating at the government-to-government level, at the corporate level, as well as academia. This is also a push that has been made by United States of America time and again to buy American AI technology and build these data centers. A number of these companies, whether it is Google or Meta or Amazon, are investing billions of dollars in India to build these data centers and innovate in the sphere of artificial intelligence. In fact, there has been a promise that has been made by India to invest up to the tune of $500 billion in the US economy up by the year 2030. So, of course, these are things that are on the table for the 2 leaders to discuss, and this conversation will happen on the sidelines of G7. This is going to happen on the 17th of June, the last day, the finale of the G7 summit here in Avian.
All right, thank you so much, Megha, for all those ground updates. With that, viewers, we're slipping into a short commercial.